Hi, this is Chris Jewell from Scotland Street Pastors. In these special podcasts, you'll hear all about street pastors, what they do, where they go, and the people that they meet. Well, hi, welcome to this first podcast about street pastors in Scotland. They've been around for a while, but we've started a series of podcasts talking about what we do, where we do it, and how you can help. And today I'm delighted to have Sandy Gunn, one of the founder members of Street Pastors in Scotland, on this podcast. So welcome, Sandy.
It's good to be with you.
Thanks. You obviously have a lot of history about street pastors and how they've developed. And when did it start in Scotland?
It's really been very exciting. The first three groups were in Aberdeen, Inverness, and Perth in the season 2007, 2008.
Well, and it's developed quite a lot from there, I think.
Oh, indeed, it has. It's been exciting to see the way in which it's developed in ways that are appropriate to the local community. For example, what happens in the islands is slightly different to what happens in Glasgow, Edinburgh.
Yes, of course, there's different communities and different needs and different nightlives and so on. And our street pastors started at night, I think, yes?
Yes, basically it started with a group of four congregations in each community getting together, setting up a committee to become the management committee, and then someone to do the administrative stuff, the coordinator. So you had therefore a local management committee who knew the scenario, with a coordinator who did the organisation stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And traditionally, it was from about 10 o'clock to 3:30, 4:30 in the morning.
Wow.
This was pre-COVID, when the nightlife was very busy. Many people went to bed and then got up. And that was when the nightlife was very, very busy.
Yes, COVID has changed a lot, I guess. But this was an answer, a response to what, trouble in the streets around the pubs and clubs, or?
It was a response to trouble in the streets. There was quite a lot of trouble from time to time. Now people are inclined to be at home, looking at their website, looking at their mobile phones, on the social media, getting in quite a lot of drink cheap from the supermarkets. But in those days, people went out and spent a lot of time on the streets. And
So,
it would vary from place to place. You had a lot of young people going out. It was one of the rites of passage that on your 18th birthday, you went out and got food.
Yes. I don't remember that these days too well, but I understand. What do the street pastors physically do, though, when they're out there?
Yeah. Yes, basically, you're out there to listen, help, and care. A lot of people feel that they're just a number. They feel they're not listened to. They feel disenfranchised in society. We're there to listen. And as people talk, they slowly start to, and it's quite difficult for a person who's got real hurts. It takes time to put into words what they're really feeling. So it's taking time just to listen and to focus on them, when so often they feel they're ignored. Jesus spent a lot of time just listening to people. He noticed people. So in our training, we're trained to notice people, to listen to people, and then to do whatever is appropriate to help and to care.
Now, I gather you're out or the patrols are out in uniform, so they're well able to be spotted and help that way.
Yes, indeed. The normal practice would be that you would be in a team of four, two on each side of the street, so that you keep an eye on each other for security, and that is seen. It is also something that is. It took a bit of time to begin with. Now street pastors are relatively known in Scotland, even if it's not in each absolute each community, but people can find out about it, can know about it. But in those days, at the very beginning, people thought that we'd flipped. And as we gave out flip-flops, they thought that Christians had flipped and it would be a flop.
Yeah.
But that, oh, I know. But that didn't happen. I remember at the launch of Stirling, for example, there were 16 street pastors,
Mm.
and we sent them out in groups of four, two pairs. And after the last one went, I was going out with another street pastor just to see how things were going on the street and to sort of encourage them. And we overheard one doorman shout to another doorman across the street, "Don't know what's happened. They're leaving the church in droves." So, but this is, it's the
Yeah.
church being on the street. And I think that was important. So we're noticed, yes, we were uniform, and there are certain communities that have slightly different scenarios. For example, if you're a street pastor in Orkney, you have to wear yellow armbands
Oh,
and have a yellow dot on your cap.
all
This
right.
It was the local inspector who felt it was very important that if people were out on the streets, they were readily distinguished from other people in if the lighting wasn't very good. I've also found it very helpful if, for example, there's somebody lying on the road, or you're trying to deal with someone on the road, you have to watch personal safety. And it's very handy to have that on, particularly if more recently there are fewer cops available, and you can wait 20 minutes to get police attendance at a road traffic.
Yes. No, I understand. And this is a Christian response, obviously, but you do work with the local authorities and the police in what we do.
Yes, normally when the group of four congregations decide to have street pastors, they approach the local authority and the police. And it's quite interesting to see what has happened. For example, the last three groups that have been started, the police have been involved in triggering it,
Mm.
which is great. Um, and I think that that's really quite important. I think we need to remember that we're there for the pundits on the streets, but also for the door staff and for the cops. Um, and work in harmony, for example, in Perth, there is an operational meeting every 6 weeks where the police, the local authority, the YMCA, and street pastors meet to discuss what is happening, to update and encourage one another. And it's actually chaired and run by street pastors.
Oh,
So this is very much integrated into the community. So it's not an imposition of the church on the community. It's working in a direct partnership with the local people. And that is one of the key features, that it's not a centralized thing.
mm.
There is the central scenario that does very helpful things. We have a guy called Chris Jewell, who's the chief executive, who helps to organise things. His job is useful in helping and encouraging and helping with training and so on. But primarily, it's a local thing of local people.
Mm. And how are these street pastor patrols received by the communities they're in?
Well, with suspicion to begin with. And then slowly people realized that street pastors were there for their sake. Simple things like, for example, girls um, uh, didn't carry the little things they do now. In those days, they just went out in high heels and they wobbled off them at night. And with a lot of glass on the street, there was a danger that their feet would be cut. So by giving them flip-flops, that helped. By the date rate drag was quite a problem, and it's spiking has resumed. I see in the headlines today. Um, but giving spikies to go into the bottle prevented that. So by having these things available, people saw that we were there actually to help and cared for them. And that changed the attitude in the street. It wasn't an imposition of aliens. Um, it, it,
Yes.
it was local people um, who actually cared for them. And that helped to change the attitude of suspicion that there was, particularly in the first 3 months. That and a sense of humour. We used to have a competition to see which pair could pick up the most bottles. And that caused quite a lot of hilarity because you were not supposed to cross the street to pick up a bottle you saw on the other side. And
Somebody else's.
the other side was right, cheat, cheat. So, to see Christians shouting cheat at each other, running across and picking up a bottle,
Yes.
we had quite a lot of fun with that. Um, the best was the pair who got 402 bottles on the
Wow.
street one night. An hotel had put out its bottles on the street, and the bin had fallen over.
My
Uh,
goodness.
so that was quite good. Now, was that fair or was that not fair?
It's good.
So
Good luck for the
the,
winners.
the,
Yes.
it meant that the punters would be laughing at us, and that
Hmm.
changed the attitude. Um, it changed the attitude too when, for example, a nightclub had a fire alarm and everyone came onto the street with the bottles, and when they were allowed back in, there were 92 bottles on the street. So we closed the road. There was no cops there. We closed the road until we picked up all the bottles.
Of course. Yes.
So car drivers saw that we were there for their sake. So it was this kind of showing the love of Christ by
Hmm.
practical things that helped to break the tension, break
Yeah.
the suspicion.
Good. And I think that's been growing and growing, I gather. The bottle's an interesting thing. Picking up bottles is preventative, I guess, to stop them being used or whatever later on in the evening.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah. Yeah.
It just practical things. Um, Lots of things practical. One of the big things early on uh, was the way of mutual aid. For example, at the Commonwealth Games in Glasgow, uh, helping out and helping tourists there.
Mm.
Um, but perhaps the biggest thing was the tea in the park, where you'd have a team of 20 out on a night shift, and the night shift lasted till 5:30 in the morning. And
Wow.
this was quite interesting because it brought together street pastors from virtually all the units in Scotland at the time came together. And I remember running shifts sometimes, and you always paired somebody with someone from a different area, so you learned from one another. And to begin with, that was the way that knit together the street pastors from lots of different areas. We learned from each other actually on the job.
Yes.
And
Yes.
it was greatly appreciated by all kinds of people because you dealt with lots of very difficult problems. And we had, for example, one year there were a couple of deaths uh, in Tea in the Park, and
Oh,
we were um, we were told that the particular drug that had come in, it had a fault in it, and we had to get help within 15 minutes or they wouldn't survive. And
wow.
I was with one young girl who was a nurse in the middle of something at a particular pinch point, and a guy hit the deck in front of us. And we realised this was quite serious. But
Mm.
it was a pinch point with 3,000 people trying to squeeze through the pinch point. So it was quite difficult to prevent the victim being stood on and trampled underfoot. While we sent a runner about 300 yards to the nearest first aid point. The girl who was with was a nurse, so that guy survived. So you have all kinds of interesting things that happened. And Tea in the Park was a fairly vertical learning curve.
Absolutely. I mean, for those who don't know, it was a major annual music festival in Scotland, attracted thousands and thousands of people. And
You had
was this
100,000 there at a night. Yes.
and 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 the team of 20 you mentioned, they would patrol around the place, making sure everybody was okay, or did
Yes.
they have special jobs to do?
Yeah, so we got lots of jobs in from the stewards and from the police. And I think one of the highlights was the time that we found a car going through the place that hadn't been checked by the stewards, and a girl was missing. And we managed to find this girl who had a disability and was vulnerable.
Mm,
We managed to find her before the police did. So it's a one-upmanship. And that particular the cop in charge that night has been extremely helpful ever since, because he saw what we could do.
yes, so going to big events like Tea in the Park is something that street pastors can do,
Yes,
as distinct from the patrols in their local communities.
yes. This is where there's almost an intelligence-led thing where we know that there are issues. For example, Glasgow, to go from the rural scene to the city scene, Glasgow has got a safe space at night in the Tron. And I remember one night being there. It's staffed by a paramedic and perhaps about half a dozen street pastors, and there are others out on patrol. I remember one night the police van arriving and delivering someone to the street pastors to deal with. Uh, I'm not going to give the details of why she was there. She was a young girl, she was 16, and she was extremely vulnerable that night through no fault of her own. What do you do at 1:30 in the morning? She didn't need to be locked up. She didn't need to be stitched up. But if she'd been left in the street, probably somebody would have offered her to want to serve from a sofa.
Yes,
And
with all the risks involved with that, of
that's
course.
where problems arise. And that's what usually happens. So Glasgow is doing that. Other scenarios are done in other areas to try to suit. Um, for example, some places have traditionally had a students' night, and
Hmm.
it's not on Friday or Saturday. In our case, it was a Thursday. So for years, we did Thursdays geared to students.
Yes, and I think I've heard that street pastors are in freshers' weeks in a number of places where obviously there are universities and colleges and so on, just getting themselves known and what we do and
Yes,
so on.
yes. I think that's the case. For example, you mentioned COVID earlier on. One of the things that was worrying in the second lockdown was that a lot of youngsters were out. They were thrown out by the parents because both parents were working. The router could only cope with two people at a time, and therefore they wanted the kids away so that the mum and dad could do some of their work on the computer at home. And
Wow,
therefore they were put out, and therefore the police asked us disregard the lockdown regulations. We need you in the streets to look after some of these young kids, because there will be there are some people who are, shall we say, streetwise, usually about 18, 19, and if it was a wet night and they had a car, they would perhaps offer them a lift somewhere, and it was an ideal place for pushing drugs to younger people, aged 14, 13, 12,
wow,
11, into primary school. And it's from then that we saw that primary school kids had drugs. Uh,
dear.
therefore, we found that recently we've been going out between 6 and 9 at night to try to be in touch with some of the younger kids.
Hmm.
So it's a case of trying to be available where it's appropriate, where people need it. Sometimes um, you can be out and meet older people as well who have had issues. You see, you can go through life without speaking to anybody. You can go to a supermarket, check out yourself. You can get money from the bank if you have it. Without speaking to anybody. So some people can go through life without speaking to anybody.
Hmm.
And a person like that finds it difficult to start to talk. But for someone who's willing to listen, some of the hurts can come out. And that's so important that people don't bottle it up.
Well, it's so good that there are people out there who are, you mentioned training a little while ago, who are trained to be able to help. And how does the training work?
Training works. There's a variety of things. Training works by a number of modules. Usually, uh, one of them is delivered by one of the Centre Trust Scotland representatives, and that's roles and responsibilities, which gives it speaks for itself, explaining the role, how you operate, how you look after one another. Then there are quite a number of other things. Um, you normally have listening skills to encourage people to use the biblical picture of having two ears and one mouth and to use them proportionally. Issues like safeguarding. One of the things that is very difficult, we've talked about safeguarding to be on the alert, but when it actually comes to the crunch, it sometimes takes just 4 or 5 seconds to realize that someone is actually disclosing something. I remember being out with a recently retired sheriff when someone made a disclosure to us. And it just took about 4 or 5 seconds, even though I'd done the training and I'd trained people in safeguarding to realize, whoops, what's happening. And I think the classic comment was the comment from the retired sheriff. I wish I'd been a street pastor before I was a sheriff. Then I would have known what to do.
Oh dear. Well,
She was extremely competent as a sheriff. She really respected sheriff as it happens, but she just saw that. I think that one of the things that we try to do is to try to train people with a whole cross section of things, roles and responsibilities, safeguarding, listening skills, but also drugs and alcohol, various other issues that people are likely to come across. For example, one fishing community, they realised that a lot of the fishermen from overseas did not have English or had very little English, so they prepared information about the local area on one side of an A4, and then a bit of a street pastors in the Christian faith on the other side of the A4. And they translated it into 30 different languages and carried it in the backpack. And so there are things, but it's a case of caring for people as they are. And that is something that is becoming increasingly rare. And I think it's quite important that street pastors are out regularly because people wonder, is it just to suit ourselves? For example, back to Stirling again, the first 8 weeks were lovely weather. They were delighted. They wondered whether to go out on the 9th week. It was absolutely bucketing. They went out and there's hardly a soul there. They came back, drowned rats. And said, well, we went because we were told to, but they felt a bit deflated. The following week, somebody spoke to the next team and said, I thought it was just a gimmick until I saw the street pastors out on a wet night. That made me think there must be something in it. Tell me about the Christian faith.
Well, yes, all weathers, particularly in
It,
Scotland,
it,
and
it is this sort of thing.
yeah,
And I think that we need to realise that there are other people also who because we're out in the street, we can perhaps help people to realise. We've had out, for example, John Swinney's been out with me quite a few times, um, and politicians of the various other parties have been out as well. And one of them said to me, I've been an MP here for years, but you've shown me a side of this community I didn't realise existed, and the tourist
mm,
board doesn't want to know.
mm. Well, it sounds like street passers obviously are a valuable resource in that way.
But
You
we
talk,
never know. We never know. I think whether the result. we've come across people who years later have said, you somebody spoke to me at the time I was thinking of ending it. And
Oh, yes.
that is one of the most, and it was, I remember the night well. I don't think we even logged it,
Mm,
other than just spoke a wee while with a young guy on a bench. I
mm,
think that was all. It wasn't
mm.
logged particularly. We prayed for him at the time and then forgot about it. But God, we believe that God works, and that's the exciting thing. Not just at the time. We get very impatient. Instant coffee, instant custard, instant emails. But God is the long picture, and I think street pastors go out in that sense. It's not us, but God who works through us, and the focus isn't on us, but on a Jesus who listens to people still, even if we can't put into words what we're feeling.
Yes. It's a Christian organization, but I think it's fair to say you're not out there on soapboxes and uh, what do you call them, out on parks proclaiming the gospel or telling people that they need to find faith or something like that.
No, in fact, in the training, we have what we call a traffic light slide. There's certain things you don't do. You don't ram religion down the throat. You don't willy-nilly hand out tracts. You don't um, uh, speak at people. In fact, you don't normally raise the name of Jesus. But the strange thing is, you don't need to, because
Mm,
people themselves are asking, what's life all about? I'm fed up. I'm just a number. And it's great to be
mm.
able to say, you're not just a number. We believe you're someone who matters. And the conversation goes from there.
Sounds great, really. You talked about new areas setting up, and is this ministry expanding, not only in different places, but maybe different types of patrols?
Yes, again, there are different types of patrols. There's another sort of aspect of it. If, for example, you have got rail pastors on some of the trains to dodgy places like where you come from, Chris. Um, uh, they're called rail pastors, and they're there, welcomed by Network Rail, because we know that there are quite a number of suicides on the railway. Sometimes people are complaining about the trains being late, and that's one of the reasons that held up because of that. And very often, people before they do something like that hang around for a while, and if we can chat to people, that's helpful. I remember one occasion, somebody at a bridge, we just had to hold them until a friend came. But just to be there at points where people are vulnerable. Another area, for example, is schools. The school pastors,
Hmm.
when they're invited into the school by the head teacher, to listen to particular individuals sometimes, to be there for them. But very often, some of the difficulties can occur outside schools at lunchtime, particularly on a Friday for those who don't have the half day on a Friday, as Highland and Edinburgh do. But there are quite a number who don't. And to have people who are out on the streets, just noticing them, it can be helpful.
Well, that sounds good, and it's interesting to know of new areas setting up because this relationship that is there for street passes with the police and local authority, I think that, as you said, they're increasingly being recognised as being helpful through the day, never mind late at night as well.
Yes, and the other interesting thing is the comment that people, that street pastors for congregations provide a free in-service training for members of congregations.
Yes, of course, the training
And
that's, yeah.
And I think that that's really quite important. It's not just people who have this as a hobby. We're there as representatives of the church on the street, and therefore sent by sending congregations. And my ultimate ambition is that street pastors will be so infectious that other Christians, although they're not in uniform, will learn to listen, help, and care. Because the same people whom we meet at night or early evening are the same school pupils, shop assistants, tradesmen, professionals who are neighbours and friends of everybody. And if we could start to change society as a whole to listen, help, and care, how important that would be when in our own community, for example, there have been quite a number of suicides in the last 7 weeks.
Oh dear. Yes. So, anybody listening to this, Sandy, they wanted to know more or become a street pastor. What do they do?
Well, they can look up the internet for street pastors and see the different areas in Scotland. There's about 28 cities where there are street pastors now, and some of them are grouped together. For example, Fife covers a number of areas. So that would be one way. I'm happy if anyone wants to chat with me. My email address is sandygunn@btinternet.com. That's all lowercase, all one word, sandygunn@btinternet.com. Or to contact yourself, Chris, as CEO in Ascension Trust Scotland, and the details are on the website.
That's great. It's great chatting to you, Sandy, and to hear just how things have developed. We'll have you back if you'll come from time to time and tell us of new developments and exciting and infectious stories, as you call them. And really grateful for speaking with you now. Thanks so much.
Okay, nice chatting, Chris.
Thanks again. Bye-bye.